And I am e-faculty. All of my courses are online. So doing ITPD3 was a little bit interesting for all of us. The course I chose to do for my ITPD3 was Biology 1010, which is known as General Biology. General Biology is a general education course, so many students take it. It's also a requirement for the nursing program, so we get students from there. It's also a prerequisite for anatomy and physiology, so we get a variety of students taking Bio 1010, both the face-to-face versions and the online version of the course. So I wanted to give you a brief overview of the technology that's gone on in terms of Bio 1010 since I've been here. I was hired August, so fall semester of 2003, and started teaching spring semester of 2004, right? So pretty much right away. At that point, we only had 3 sections of Bio 1010 online. Over the course of time, and at that point, our lectures were actually purchased by a publisher, manufacturer, where there were videos that the students watched. We chose which ones they watched that coincided with the topics we wanted them to do. So it wasn't until pretty much a year later, until spring 2005, that we actually had our first lectures actually in the course that were more tailored to what we were actually doing instead of relying on an outside publisher. Pretty much about fall of 2006, I took over as managing all of the 1010 courses where all of these flags are showing. And in that time, since I started teaching here, us having 3 sections of Bio 1010 online, we are now at 10 sections online. And actually for the fall, we are running 11 sections of Bio 1010 online. All right? And in that time, as technology changes, so has the software that I've used to do our online lectures. When I first took over doing the lectures, I was using a program called Empatica, which still exists, which allows you to convert PowerPoint presentations to JavaScript, so they're much more compact instead of having a complete PowerPoint up there for students to try and download. Because back then, I think even I had DSL at my house, so in order for students to do that, so students were either, if they were lucky, they had DSL or they were using dial-up. So in order to be able to attain these things, they had to be much smaller files. About 2010, I switched over to a software package called AuthorPoint Lite, A, because it was free, and B, because the Empatica that I had upgraded to a version where I had to pay again, and I didn't really want to output that money. I used AuthorPoint Lite probably for about a couple of cycles to about 2012 or so, and then I found iSpring Free, which I've been using to this point. Both the AuthorPoint allowed you to convert PowerPoint presentations to Flash, as did the iSpring Free. So this was great. You know, I had now moved from DSL in my home to Fios. Woohoo! You know, I was blazing fast. And as the county kind of transitioned too, as we were moving from DSL lines in the county to Fios, again, the Flash allowed it to be about 97% of the original size. So again, these small packages for students that didn't necessarily have that. Actually, when I started ITPD3, I found out my lovely version of iSpring that I love so much, because the only down point is that it was in Flash. And anybody that has an Apple device knows that Flash does not work on an Apple device. I found out that my iSpring Free is now an HTML5 converter, which is great because HTML5 plays on all mobile devices across the board. So that is where we are in terms of the evolution of my course. So prior to doing ITPD3, I did have narrated PowerPoint lectures that were up in my courses. We've had that almost 10 years that we've had that. So they were there, they were narrated, they had pictures, so we had the audio, everything else to appeal to audio and visual learners. They had navigation controls, so students could stop, rewind, take notes. If they could jot down questions, they could then send to me and everything else. We also had transcripts, A to B ADA compliant, but it also served as notes for the students as well. So if they had those notes, and then also it had URLs to any videos that were interspersed in the lectures. All right, so that was until I started doing ITPD3. All right, one of the research articles that I read a couple of years ago was talking about this transition of e-learners, and that as more technology develops, that they're going from e-learners to what we call now mobile learners. So they're learning on mobile devices. So I took this opportunity in terms of the iPad, and now that I knew this new software was there, to go, hey, let's try and make my lectures as mobile as possible so my students who are now becoming M-learners can access their course wherever they are on whatever device is there. In that same respect, it means I have to transition from E-faculty to M-faculty, right? I am mobile faculty, and what this means is that I'm rarely at my desk. I'm teaching from many, many different places, and just some of the places I've taught from this semester. The pool, because my kids are on a swim team, so I'm at the pool 5 days a week, twice on Tuesdays. My younger son is on a golf team, so while he is out either at lessons or golfing, I am in the clubhouse with the Wi-Fi, answering emails or anything else, while my kids are at karate, because that's another 2.5 hours out of my life once a week. I also had the privilege of teaching from Paris and London this semester. That's the kind of thing. And then usually I'm teaching from my couch. So that's also, so basically I am mobile everywhere, using mobile devices, and I will say I am not necessarily brand friendly. I have a Windows laptop I use the iPad, I use my Chromebook, pretty much whatever's handy and is charged is what I will use to do what I need to do in terms of the teaching. So, in this idea of supporting these M-learners, what I wanted to do was create a parallel learning experience. I wanted these online students to have as much of a parallel learning experience as our face-to-face students were having, which meant I needed to provide them with mobile lectures that were available on all platforms. Also, the other thing that in our face-to-face classes, the outline that we use, we have something that we call Cooperative Activities. And with the Cooperative Activities, basically they're informal assessments the students do as we're going through lecture to see if they actually understand the topic. And if they don't understand a topic, we can tell them, hey, maybe you need to go back to review it, and there's no penalty there. So I wanted to include that in the lectures as well. So in order to do that, I used two pieces of technology, two types of software, iSpring Free, which I had been using before, and Free Quizmaker. Notice the free in both of them. I am frugal. I don't necessarily want to spend money when I don't have to. All right? iSpring Free is great. It's a PowerPoint to Flash and HTML5 converter. So it will convert to either Flash if you wanted to or HTML5, which you can then put up on the web. Again, HTML5 is convertible with iOS devices. And it's great because you can have a very media-rich presentation with audio, videos, transitions, animations, everything else. It preserves all of that in your HTML5 presentation. So all of those things you would have in your classroom, I can now present to my online students as part of their lecture. And again, they have the controls where they can stop, pause, rewind, things like that. All right. Free Quizmaker, also made by the same people who make iSpring Free, is an interactive testing tool. So you can either do quizzing or testing using this. And it was giving me the ability to take the cooperative activities that my face-to-face students would have and allow them to have this informal assessment in the middle of lecture. So you can do lecture, kind of stop and go, hey, do you understand this? If not, maybe you need to go back. Okay?
Diffusion is the movement of substances from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. Because of the concentration gradient, this type of movement across a cell membrane does not require the input of energy.
Whether the direction is out or in depends on where the concentration is higher for each different solute.
So after they've gone through the content of, say, osmosis and diffusion, this particular quiz has 3 questions for them to answer. So the movement of water molecules across the membrane is called, and then there's also interactive in terms of you can see that there's an image there as well. So after that, the student can submit all, and then they get feedback in terms of how many they answered correctly. The Free Quizmaker allows you to set what your standard is, and then based on that standard, if they didn't do well, my message is, you didn't really get this concept, you may want to go back and review it, or, hey, you did a good job, you're ready to move on. Okay? All right, so my lessons learned in terms of doing this. My lectures converted no problem using HTML5. Not an issue with that. As you notice with the embedded video that I had there in the lectures, these videos are now considered mixed media by Blackboard, so I had to give the students instructions on how they play. And I was just like, oh great, I can do some screencast. Fortunately, some other institution already had some YouTube videos for that, so I just put those up instead for my students to see that. Free Quiz Maker, for whatever reason, they were Flash, and even though I converted the whole lecture to HTML5, those quizzes did not convert to HTML5, so they stayed as Flash. So if any student was viewing them on an iOS device, they just couldn't view that particular slide. It just came up saying that it was Flash. All right. In terms of integration results, I gave my students a little survey in terms of these particular lectures. 80% of my students actually viewed the lectures on some type of mobile device, either a phone, iPad, tablet, anything else. Of those that viewed the lectures on a mobile device, about half of them viewed them on a fairly regular basis, several times per week. Others did it a few times each semester. All right. So in terms of them using it, it was available to them. Some of them gang-ho, completely used it. Some of them were just like, hey, if I was out and about, I sort of used it. All right, in terms of the quizzes that were embedded in the lectures, all of my students actually completed those, which was great to see that they actually did that. 80% of them thought they were helpful. 60% thought that it actually helped them prepare for exams. So in terms of that, not bad. All right, so the success of this on the student side, I think it was very successful because I don't think they even realized that there was an implementation. At the beginning of the semester, their lectures were there. They just clicked the button. They may have had some trouble with the mixed media, which I provided information for, and the quiz is not showing up in the iOS devices for that. Those that questioned, or I put up announcements saying that you would basically just have to do those on a desktop machine or a Windows tablet or things like that. On my end, it was very successful. I learned a new tool, and I learned a new feature of an old tool I had been using. It helped me expand my brain because the free quiz maker only has 3 question types. It allows true, false, multiple choice, and multiple answer. So I had to take all the different questions that I had and figure out how to formulate them into one of those 3 question types. So got to expand my brain a little bit that way. So that was the limitations of the free version. All right, so next steps. QuizMaker 7, because I did a little research, which is the paid version of that, actually does allow for the conversion of the quizzes to HTML5. All right, it is $238 for academic pricing for one license.
They have sales sometimes.
They have sales sometimes. My hope, however, is that just like with iSpring Free, the HTML5 converter, which used to only be with the professional paid version, will eventually trickle down to the free version. And the next thing I'm going to do, which I plan on doing this summer, is my reproductive biology class, which is also online, converting all of my lectures over so they're again in the HTML5 and they include these embedded interactive quizzes.